dark, solid state and true timbre, as well as
It's noticeable to me that when I use a 4K mouse, it just feels more responsive.
you can go as fast as you can without trying to go on. Hey guys, welcome back to another audio review. Today, we're here to talk about the Symphonium Helios. So for a bit of background on Symphonium, they're a boutique IEM manufacturer based in Singapore, and the Helios here was their previous flagship IEM. Now I say previous because the very recent Symphonium Crimson has overtaken its place as the flagship product. Symphonium is also the partner of Subtonic and is responsible for the actual manufacturing of the Subtonic Storm, which I also own over here. So Symphonium have an extremely loyal fan base, and at this point I wouldn't even hesitate to call their following as a cult. Right, they're cultists. They hold quite a good reputation amongst the enthusiasts, a brand, I'm not talking about the cultists obviously, and so I was always curious about their products as well. Was this cult following justified? Are the products actually good, or is this just some kind of overblown hype trade? So without further ado, let's jump straight into the Helios. Now at this point, IEM manufacturers all come up with heavily varying levels of packaging and extravagancy, so it was interesting to see how the Helios was presented. As it turns out, the Helios just comes inside of a little black compact box. There's not a lot of extra stuff. Here's a Symphonium sticker. So opening it up, you get greeted with a nicely machined carry case in which the IEMs would also come in, and otherwise there would be a cleaning brush. Below it is a Symphonium Helios badge, which you can't actually remove from the box, but it sits there solely as presentation. On the bottom, there's a little pull tray that you can remove from the box, and it reveals a serial number plate along with the air tips. Overall, a simple yet elegant packaging. So the Helios retails at $1,100 US, and it's available from many different retailers around the world. Now, the Helios itself doesn't really feature any design aspects on it. It's just a black colored IEM with Symphonium and Helios written on it. The shell material is definitely made of high quality premium aluminium alloy, and it feels extremely solid and durable. The build quality here definitely deserves praise, and you can notice the same DNA with that of the Storm. The stock cable that comes with this toy unit was that of a 2.5mm termination, so unfortunately I don't have any sources that take 2.5mm or any adapters, so I have been using cables from other IEMs such as this Unique Melody Mess Mark III cable. Also, Mess Mark III review coming soon. However, I do want to say, I do not like the stock cable of the Helios at all. It's extremely thin, feels flimsy, and I wouldn't want to use it regardless of whether I had a termination for this or not. Now, with cables like this, I'm always worried that I will accidentally snap the wire at some point if it gets caught on something when I'm trying to pull it out, even though the tensile strength of the wire is probably far more than I'd ever imagine it to be. But regardless, I'm just not a big fan of this cable at all. Regarding fit of the IEMs, now I've seen plenty of reports online of people having struggles fitting the Helios, but I really didn't have that problem. I think it was fine. The IEM itself isn't actually as big as people make it out to be. It is a little bit on the heavier end of things from that premium build quality and material used for the actual shell. The nozzle, however, is extremely long. So as a result, you can get quite deep insertion.
That's what she said!
Deep insertion with the right size air tips, and they should fit pretty snug and seal really well. Now the driver configuration aspect is an interesting thing to talk about. The Helios is a simple 4 balanced armature setup with a 4-way crossover. So each driver is supposed to just do its respective frequency range. With the way the modern market is nowadays, high-end IEMs are starting to have a driver war, in which everyone is trying to shove as many drivers into an IEM as they can. So it's quite rare to see IEMs at this price point and beyond using only 4 balanced armatures. Others include the Hidishin Viento, but that thing isn't exactly new either. Symphonium intentionally went down this pathway with the goal of trying to change the community's perception where more drivers means better, because that's not supposed to always be true. And they're trying to show that you can get amazing performance even at a lower driver count. But the most important thing here for us is obviously sound. So does the 4BA truly match up against those with more than 10 drivers, let's say? Let's find out. In terms of sonic aspects, the Helios is tuned as a clean, lean, neutral listen. It feels somewhat analytical. Now, regarding genres, I will have to say, the Helios is exceptional when it comes to instruments that rely on upper harmonics and treble extension. So things that specifically came to my mind when I listened to them, and I never noticed this before. String instruments that involve plucking and upper harmonics, such as guitar, harp, Chinese guzheng, and those kinds of instruments. Not necessarily string instruments like double bass, cello, and violin, but some may still like how that sounds on the Helios. Additionally, wind instruments which relied on the same, such as flutes, clarinets, were extremely standout. Now, vocals are also a delight if the hi-fi sound of being clean, lean with perceived clarity versus that of a warm, weighty listen is what you prefer. I definitely wouldn't recommend the Helios for anything modern, like modern pop, hip-hop, electronic music, rap, and the likes of which rely on bass. So speaking of bass, the Helios is a sub-bass focused IEM, with quite good sub-bass extension. Now, it doesn't quite rumble very hard in terms of quantity, but the quality is surprisingly high. And it definitely feels like there's enough for acoustic tracks and other things where bass isn't the focus, but it also needs to be present to actually have an engagement factor. The mid-bass on the Helios, however, to put bluntly, is quite poor. Now, the quality from it is acceptable, but it really never gets me head bobbing or feeling engaged, because the quantity is just severely lacking. So the Helios is tuned.
His voice crack killed me.
So the Helios is tuned with a dip around that mid bass to lower mids area at 200 to 500 Hz. As a result, even with the applied bass shelf, there is still a noticeable lack of quantity in the mid bass. Now, to some, this might not even be a bad thing at all, if that's what you prefer. But as someone who came from being a bass head, in addition, with a library that mostly lived on bass, this definitely took the life and fun away from heaps of my tracks. Now, I don't want
Bass?
I want
Bass.
I don't want bass.
I want bass.
However, for those that listen to genres that don't really rely on mid-bass and lower mids, this could be exactly what you're looking for. I have a friend who is the exact opposite of me, and he has an exclusive fear of mid-bass and lower mids.
Ooh, mid-bass, lower mids, oh, scary.
Now, speaking of mids, there is that dip in the lower mids, but the upper mids remain neutral. So the result of this is that sounds are given a very hi-fi type sound, same thing that hi-fi man enjoyers will like. It's filled with clarity and presence, yet things are never shouty in the sense of it. And chances are, if you get any listening fatigue, it's accumulated due to listening at a volume probably too high. And it's not just the upper mids that's causing that, but it's also the treble. And if you're listening at a volume that high, it's probably because you're searching for that bass. It has quite a Harmon-esque lower mids tuning, but at this point, I do believe that most of us don't actually enjoy Harmon lower mids, especially when there isn't much mid-bass to balance it out. So as I was mentioning before, this might be a big benefit to some, but I personally cannot enjoy this. There are specific genres and tracks where this lower mids dip can help, such as hearing female vocals can really stand out in terms of clarity and being quite spectacular, or piano, guitar strums, flutes, all sounding extremely crispy. Yet there's always just that little lack of engagement and fun factor. I just can't feel myself vibe to it. So the best way I could describe it is, the Helios sounds like your Nobility from back in the 1700s sitting at an opera up in a VIP seat by yourself, where the entire show is just for your own personal enjoyment with minimum noise and interference. However, you can never make it replicate like a modern concert or music festival, club, that kind of thing, surrounded by that upbeat energy and getting yourself engaged and having fun with the music. It's for those that want to sit back and enjoy a performance with their eyes closed over those that want to have their head bopping, toe tapping, and have fun. Now moving on to treble. This is where the Helios truly shines, in the way that most other IEMs within its price range cannot compete at all. The treble on the Helios is extremely smooth, non-fatiguing, yet maintains great sparkly presence with extension. It provides a phenomenal sense of harmonics and associated timbre. There's also nothing that particularly bothers me in terms of being peaky or fatiguing. Percussion is excellently rendered, it's never overpowering, yet it's never hidden in the background. There really isn't much I can say about the treble other than give it praise. Easily some of the best treble there is. Now regards to resolution here. The Helios is done very well, and I really do think it is one of the more resolving IEMs at that approximately $1,000 price mark. Details and background sounds and tracks are all audible should you look for them, though the Helios isn't necessarily always throwing the detail in your face. Now, separation is closely tied with the detail retrieval, and the Helios separates just fine too. as you'd expect from something over $1,000 US. Soundstage, however, is where I would like to make a comment on. Now, the staging of the Helios is alright, and the emphasis here is it's just okay, it's alright. I give credit to the Helios in regards to soundstage height and depth. That's something that other IEMs tend to struggle with. But the width, however, is where the Helios is behind some others in my opinion. Now, with that being said, it still stages better than probably the Monarch Mark II and Monarch Mark III. However, compared to some other IEMs slightly above it, such as the Diva or the Divinity, both of which I have reviewed, the width aspect is where the Helios starts struggling a bit. Now, as a result, in very busy passages, especially that of, say, electronic tracks, there are times where this starts affecting the perceived resolution and separation. The sounds are well defined and separated, but at the same time, because it isn't as wide, it can sound somewhat congested. So back to that live performance sitting up in a VIP type reference I had, if you were to sit near the front row of a performance, then even during busy passages, you can probably still pick up everything in a wide sense. You know, things are on the left, things are on the right, things on the center, in the angle. However, if you were sitting further back from the stage, you sat really far back near the back of the hall, you can still pick up a defined performance in terms of each sound and instrument, especially during solo or duo or just less busy periods. But then when it comes to a final chorus and every sound is being pushed towards you at near max volumes, then things start sounding a bit congested because all that sound is coming from just this space. Yes, you can hear there's a violin, there's a this, there's a that, but it just sounds a little bit more congested and hard to pick up. Now, in terms of other technicalities, the Helios is fine. Nothing particularly poor, nothing particularly stand out. Dynamics and transient attack are pretty good. Positional audio works fine for games. Now, in fact, gaming is surprisingly good on this IEM despite having slightly less wide soundstage. So, soundstage doesn't dictate the gaming performance of an IEM, as much as everyone always talks about, oh, this has soundstage so it's good for IEMs. No, it's about the balance of every dimension in terms of width, depth, and height. Now, the tuning of the Helios here also results in a high clarity, well separated sound, and therefore the positional audio within that stage also needs to be done well, and Helios does that well too. So for comparisons that come to mind for me, Monarch Mark II and Monarch Mark III are approximately at the $1,000 price range. Now, unfortunately, as much as people think the Monarch Mark II was good, it was just okay. The IEM itself actually sounds quite lifeless and boring after you listen to it for a while. The tonality aspect definitely is good. The Monarch Mark III improved on this heavily to make it much more fun and engaging in terms of bass and treble, both in terms of quality and quantity. So the Monarch Mark III then is more V-shaped compared to the original Monarch Mark II. Compared to the Helios, both Monarch Mark II and the Helios struggle a bit in this engagement and fun aspect, and the Monarch Mark III definitely does this better. Both Monarchs are tuned with more mid-bass and lower mids than the Helios, which I think are also better done than the Helios. But then the Helios destroys both Monarchs in terms of treble. In terms of soundstage, I think the Helios slightly surpasses both Monarchs in terms of depth and height, while being about equal in terms of width. Now, the width aspect here might be a little skewed, because an IEM that doesn't sound too deep or tall often gives you a perception that it's wider even if it isn't, because there isn't that contrast. The Helios, however, because of the deeper depth and height, it feels maybe not as wide as the Monarchs, but I think generally they were the same. Other technicalities are quite similar too, and I really don't think there is truly much to differentiate between here. Now, if you want more detailed comparisons or have other IEMs you'd like to ask me about, join the Discord and we can talk about it there. So thanks to Symphonium and Damien for organizing the tour unit of the Helios. While I don't particularly enjoy this IEM myself, I can definitely see where the appreciation and the following for the product comes from. And I know there are many people out there who will find this to be their ideal type of sound. Now, I look forward to seeing more Symphonium releases, and I'm especially excited for the Crimson tour whenever that comes around. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.